From styled spaces to sacred stories, I'm Ashley Bruggeman, and this is Charm and Circumstance. Today, I'm sharing the books that have shaped me. These aren't business books or design books. These are heart books. Books that walked beside me through big transitions, softened me with grace, and stretched me with bold truth. If you're craving a deeper kind of inspiration, whether you're rebuilding something in your life, launching something new, or just trying to live more gently with yourself, you're in good company. From floor plans to 5-year plans, business to finding balance, I'm Ashley Bruggeman, an interior designer with a love for beautiful living and a belief that style and substance go hand in hand. I'm pulling back the curtain on design, resilience, and entrepreneurship. Expect real talk, refined tips, and just the right mix of polish and personality. So pour something sweet and join me for a thoughtful conversation with a generous helping of Charm and Circumstance. So I've listed these books out 1 through 10 and tried to place them in an order based on, I think, their overall influence on me. However, it's pretty subjective, obviously, and I think it really depends on, of course, what you're facing in that moment, going through in that chapter. So some might be more relevant than others. So I'm going to count down to my top book and the influence it had on me. So we're going to start with book number 10, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. I actually mentioned this book in the previous episode number 9 on rest. This book hit me like a whisper and a warning all at once. John Mark Comer names what so many of us feel but rarely admit. We're addicted to hurry. He writes, "Hurry is violence on the soul." And when I read that, I felt convicted. Because as someone who thrives in productivity, list, and forward motion, it was easy to justify the pace I was running until I realized I wasn't living in that pace. I was surviving. This book led me to consider everything from my calendar to my morning routine. Comer outlines 4 spiritual practices to slow down: silence and solitude, Sabbath, simplicity, and slowing. Each one felt countercultural and completely essential. I started to protect my Sundays. I removed a few yeses that were costing me more than I realized. I began to build in margin moments, small spaces in my day where I don't fill the silence. And it's changed me. This book didn't just shape me, it slowed me, and I'm better because of it. Book number 9, Anatomy of a Breakthrough by Adam Alter. So this book is about getting unstuck and building momentum. He really digs into the science behind ruts and how to escape them. This is the book I didn't know I needed until I was in the middle of feeling stuck, creatively, emotionally, professionally. Adam Alter breaks down the psychology of what he calls the friction phase, those long, slow stretches where progress feels non-existent. He writes, being stuck is the starting line, not the finish line. That was a reframe I desperately needed. We often see being stuck as failure, but Alter argues it's simply a signal, a part of the cycle. He backs it all with research and real-world stories, but what makes this book so readable is how relatable it is. He unpacks everything from procrastination to burnout and offers practical ways to shift momentum. I found myself highlighting almost every chapter. This book shaped how I view progress, not as a constant climb, but as a series of pivots, pauses, and eventually breakthroughs. Book number 8, The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post by Allison Pataki. I've also mentioned this book in a previous episode. I can't even remember which one it was, but this is historical fiction, which is one of my favorite genres. So this is about legacy, vision, and feminine ambition. My overall takeaway from this book is that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build while you're fully alive. This book is pure delight, elegance, and inspiration wrapped up in historical fiction. Allison Pataki tells the story of Marjorie Merriweather Post, heiress, philanthropist, hostess, entrepreneur, and one of the most fascinating women of the 20th century. Marjorie inherited the Post cereal company and turned it into a business empire that would eventually become General Foods. What captivated me was not her wealth. It was her will, her ability to move through marriages, wars, motherhood, and power with remarkable vision. She surrounded herself with beauty, not just for status, but as a form of stewardship. She saw art, architecture, and elegance as responsibility. One quote from the book reads, "A woman's legacy is not built in her fortune, but in the lives she touches with it." That line stayed with me. Reading this book shaped the way I think about legacy, leadership, and the intentional curation of a beautiful life. Book number 7, How to Walk Into a Room by Emily P. Freeman. Emily Freeman has a gift for helping us name the things that we're feeling but don't have words for. How to Walk Into a Room is a guide for navigating transitions with grace, clarity, and a whole lot of courage. I picked this up during a time when doors were closing in my life, some gently, others loudly. I didn't know if I was supposed to knock again, wait patiently, or find a new hallway altogether. This book gave me a framework for decision-making when things aren't black and white. She writes, "Sometimes the most life-giving thing we can do is walk out of a room, not because we failed, but because we're finally paying attention." That felt radical to me. In a world that tells us to stay, to push through, to prove something, Emily invites us to ask, what if leaving is obedience? This book also helped me better understand transitions in my relationships, my business, and my creative work. It doesn't give you a checklist. It gives you discernment. And for that, I'm grateful. Book number 6, Healing Wounds by Diane Carlson Evans. So this book came to me at a very special time, as it was the book that I gifted to every female veteran that flew on the Honor Flight Kentucky flight to Washington, D.C. in June of 2022. I was blessed to sit on the board at Honor Flight Kentucky and then serve as the flight director for Kentucky's first ever all-female flight. So we had 134 female veterans across all ages and conflicts, and got to take them to DC for a one-day trip to visit the memorials dedicated to their service. And it was an emotional and healing and just incredible day and experience. And I gifted a copy of this book to each of them at the end of the day. So, of course, before I gifted it to them, I did read it. And it was an educational lesson, as well as one in realizing you don't even have to be a veteran by any means to realize that as women, we all stand on each other's shoulders. So Diane, the author, was an Army nurse in Vietnam. And this memoir tells her story, not just of war, but of the long, quiet battle that came after. So it's about trauma, resilience, advocacy, and ultimately healing. But it's also about being a woman in spaces where women were often invisible. What moved me the most wasn't just what Diane lived through, it was what she chose to do with that pain. After years of silence and being overlooked, she led the decades-long fight to establish the Vietnam Women's Memorial in Washington, D.C., which we were blessed to visit on that trip and lay a wreath there. She turned her wounds into a legacy of remembrance and recognition for others. Reading her story changed the way I think about strength, about rest, and what it means to give so much of yourself and then try to come back to yourself. It reminded me that healing isn't always neat or linear. Sometimes healing looks like finally telling the truth, Sometimes it looks like stopping long enough to feel the weight you've been carrying. And sometimes it looks like using your voice for yourself and others when it would be easier to stay quiet. This book shaped me by reminding me that rest isn't just physical, it's emotional and spiritual too. And that acknowledging our wounds doesn't make us weak, it makes us whole. If you've ever felt unseen in your giving, or if you're carrying a part of your story that still aches, this book will meet you right there. Diane fought for over a decade to get the first memorial dedicated to the service of women on the National Mall. As part of that process, she had to go in front of a board that had to give approval for any memorial going in the National Mall. She was met with the response of, well, if women want a memorial now, the canines will too. And that line helped her to raise most of the funds that she then needed to make this all happen. Healing Wounds is a book that I talk to everyone about. And if you're one of the people who loved reading the book The Women that did become pretty popular here in the last year or two, this is the real story of that. And I believe the author that wrote The Women actually interviewed Diane. So this is straight from the mouth of those who lived it. It's not a light read, but it is a beautiful and brave one. Book number 5 is Finerman's Rules by Karen Finerman. Every now and then I come across a book that feels like a well-heeled woman in a corner office, pulling me aside to whisper the real rules. The ones no one teaches you in school or on Instagram. Finerman's Rules is that book. Karen Finerman is a hedge fund CEO, CNBC panelist, wife, and mother of 4. And in this book, she doesn't just offer business advice, she shares what it really looks like to navigate ambition, family, and femininity in rooms often built for men. What makes it powerful isn't just her resume, it's her honesty. She writes, "Success is not about being perfect. It's about being present, strategic, and resilient." That right there felt like a permission slip. In a world that glorifies flawless execution, Karen gives women, especially women who want both a full professional life and a rich personal one, the framework to lead, negotiate, pivot, and still pack school lunches if they want to. What I appreciated most is her unapologetic stance on embracing femininity and leadership. She talks openly about keeping a manicure, wearing heels, and leveraging intuition. Not in spite of being a woman, but because of it. She doesn't tell you to be less of yourself to succeed. She tells you to know yourself better. One chapter that stuck with me is about perception versus reality. She writes, "People will always make assumptions. Your job isn't to change their minds. It's to know who you are and deliver on it." As a business owner, a mom, and someone who moves in both creative and corporate spaces, that message landed. It reminded me that success doesn't have to follow someone else's blueprint. It can look like a spreadsheet and a signature lipstick. Finerman's Rules is smart, direct, and refreshingly grounded. It shaped how I think about owning my strengths strategically, unapologetically, but with style. If you're building something big while balancing a lot, this book is a must. It reads like a mentorship between hardcovers. Book number 4, All My Knotted Up Life by Beth Moore. There are memoirs that entertain, there are those that inform, and then there are the rare few that unravel you in the best possible way. That's what Beth Moore's All My Knotted Up Life did for me. Beth has always been known for her bold Bible teaching and spiritual depth, but in this book, she lays down her title and picks up her story. With raw, Southern vulnerability and soul-bearing honesty, she walks us through the painful, private chapters that shaped her public ministry. Childhood trauma, betrayal, church hurt, and the ongoing complexity of being a woman called to lead in spaces that didn't always welcome her voice. One of the most powerful lines in the book is, "There's a difference between secrets and sacred silence, But when we confuse the two, shame takes root. That struck me because so many of us, especially women, have grown up learning how to make hard things look tidy. Beth doesn't do that here. She invites you into the mess. She makes space for the knotted parts, the disappointments, the doubts, the desperation, and she traces God's faithfulness through every thread. What I loved most about this book is that it didn't try to resolve everything. It wasn't about tying up the bow. It was about telling the truth, and in that, there is healing. As someone who values faith, legacy, and living with integrity, even when it costs something, this book reminded me that the calling on your life doesn't always make sense to others, and it won't always come wrapped in applause. But if you follow it faithfully, it will always lead you home. If you've ever felt like your story was too messy to matter, or if you're walking through a season that feels more tangled than triumphant, All My Knotted Up Life will minister to your heart in a way that only Beth Moore can. Book number 3, It's Not Supposed to Be This Way, by Lisa TerKeurst. Even detours are part of the divine design. There's something sacred about the moment you realize your life doesn't look like you thought it would. And then there's the moment you finally say it out loud. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Lisa TerKeurst gives us permission to sit in that gap, in the disappointment, in the detour, in the unraveling of a story we didn't choose. In It's Not Supposed to Be This Way, she doesn't sugarcoat suffering. She doesn't wrap it up in a bow. Instead, she invites us into the messy middle with her, where faith doesn't look like clarity, it looks like trust. She writes, what if disappointment is really the exact appointment your soul needs to radically encounter God? That line made me stop and close the book for a moment, because we're so quick to rush past pain, to reframe it, to fix it, or if we're honest, bury it. But Lisa teaches that God is not absent in the undoing. He's present in it. Reading this book shaped me during a season where things felt heavy and unresolved. It helped me recognize that sometimes healing comes in pieces, and that being heartbroken and hopeful are not mutually exclusive. Another quote I've returned to often is, we can feel afraid, but we don't have to live afraid. That truth grounded me when fear wanted the final say. Lisa's vulnerability, paired with wisdom rooted in Scripture, makes this book not only relatable, but anchoring. It's Not Supposed to Be This Way doesn't promise a happy ending. It offers something better, a deeper faith, right in the middle of the unknown. If you're in a season of disappointment, detour, or quiet devastation, this book will make you feel less alone and more seen. Book number 2, The Circle Maker by Mark Batterson. This book changed my prayer life and honestly my entire mindset around dreaming big. Mark Batterson makes a bold claim. He says bold prayers honor God and God honors bold prayers. It stopped me in my tracks. The Circle Maker is built around the idea of drawing metaphorical circles in prayer, of persistently praying over something with specificity, passion, and belief. Batterson draws inspiration from the legend of Hani, the Circle Maker, a Jewish sage who drew a circle in the sand and told God he wouldn't move until it rained. It sounds audacious, even a little uncomfortable, but that's exactly the point. Before reading this book, I often kept my prayers small, safe, manageable, polite. This book convicted me in the best way. Why was I limiting my prayers when the God I believe in is limitless? It gave me permission to pray in color, not in grayscale. It also reframed how I saw unanswered prayers, not as rejection, but redirection. One line I underlined and have come back to again and again is, if your prayers aren't impossible to you, they're insulting to God. Can you even imagine? This book has walked me through personal seasons of decision-making, big business dreams, and even in praying circles around my son and his future. It shaped not only how I talk to God, but how I believe he talks back. Book number 1, Try Softer by Andi Kolber. Try Softer is one of those books I didn't know I needed until I felt seen in every page. I literally have the sticky tabs coming out from all over the book in different directions. It's written by Andy Kolber, a licensed therapist who combines faith, neuroscience, and personal experience to ask a radical question. What if you didn't have to try harder? What if you tried softer? Let that sink in for a second. Because if you're anything like me and so many women I know, you've been told that trying harder is the answer. Push through, power up, hustle more. But Kolber gently, wisely turns that on its head. She invites us to pay attention to our pain, not bulldoze past it, to become curious instead of critical, to listen instead of override. She writes, trying softer is the life-changing practice of listening to our needs and responding with compassion. That hit me like a whisper to my soul, because when we're constantly pushing, it's easy to lose sight of what we actually need, emotionally, spiritually, even physically. This book doesn't excuse passivity. It offers a better form of strength, one rooted in self-awareness and grace. Kolber walks through practices like grounding, breathing, setting boundaries, and honoring our emotional experiences without shame. It's incredibly practical, deeply compassionate, and rooted in the truth that healing isn't about performance. It's about presence. There's one line I've written in my journal more than once. You don't have to white-knuckle your way through life. That sentence, it felt like freedom, permission to stop striving, to rest, to trust that being gentle with ourselves is not weakness, it's wisdom. Try Softer's shaped how I mother, how I lead, how I speak to myself in moments of stress. If you're exhausted from trying to do everything right or carrying quiet weight that no one sees, this book will meet you right there. These books are kind of a library of becoming. Some taught me how to rest, others taught me how to roar. And a few reminded me that sometimes it's okay to just be still. I'd love to know which ones that you've read or which ones are calling to you now. Come say hi on Instagram at Charm and Circumstance. I've also linked to a list for you of each of these books so that you can find them easily for yourself. And that link is going to be in the show notes as well. It is also on my website at ashleymorgan-interiors.com/download. You can also subscribe to the monthly install where I share these kinds of deeper reflections along with design inspiration and life rhythms that I think you'll love. Until next time, be gentle, stay curious, and keep turning the page. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining me on Charm and Circumstance. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along on Instagram because charm is personal and circumstance is what you make of it.